You wake to the faint chill of the highland morning, the kind that makes the woven cotton blanket feel heavier than it is. The light seeps slowly through the slits in the wooden shutters, not yet bright enough to show the valley in full color. You lie still for a few moments, listening to the muted sounds outside, someone sweeping a courtyard with a bundle of twigs, a distant goat calling for its kid, the gentle creak of a leather strap as a mule shifts its weight. The air is thin here, at this altitude, and your first breaths feel clean but cool, brushing the inside of your nose with a dry edge. Your sleeping mat is set against the far wall of the small plastered room, and from here you can see the wooden chest where you keep your writing tools. The ink, the reed pens, the smooth parchment sheets, all neatly tucked away, waiting for the day's work. You know you will need them before the sun climbs high. The negotiations for the dowry will not wait for a sluggish scribe. You rise slowly, rubbing the sleep from your eyes with the back of your hand. Your tunic, folded neatly the night before, is cool to the touch. The fabric is thickly woven from cotton grown further south, not as soft as imported cloth, but dependable in the mountain air. Pulling it over your head, you smooth the wrinkles down with both palms. The smell of yesterday's frankincense clings faintly to the fibers. Through the open shutters comes the scent of smoke from the cooking hearths below. Somewhere in the lower courtyard, someone is roasting barley to grind into flour. You hear the rhythmic tapping of a wooden pestle against a mortar. It sets a kind of steady beat to the morning, familiar and grounding. You step outside into the courtyard, your sandals brushing over the packed earth. The sky above is a pale blue now, streaked with long threads of white cloud. The mountains on the horizon stand in muted shades of brown and green, their peaks softened by a veil of mist. The sun, still low, casts long shadows from the clay water jars lined along the wall. Today's task is not unusual for you, yet every family's business carries its own weight. You will speak for one side, listen to the other, and try to bring them to terms without stirring resentment. It is the kind of work that requires patience, not only with the families, but with the slow, careful way that such matters are spoken of. From the street beyond, you hear the bells of a mule train approaching, their gentle clanging carrying over the stone walls. The animals' hooves clatter on the cobbles, and the smell of dust rises in their wake. These are traders from the lowlands, perhaps, bringing salt or coffee beans. Their goods will pass into the market, and their talk will pass into the ears of anyone who listens. Historians still argue whether dowry negotiations in this time were more heavily influenced by the bride's family's wealth or by the groom's lineage. Some claim that social rank outweighed material goods. Others point to records showing lists of livestock, cloth, and precious items carefully itemized. You know from experience that it is rarely one without the other. You pause at the doorway, leaning against the wooden frame, watching the street come alive. Somewhere up the hill, the church bell will sound soon, marking the hour when such formal business can begin. Until then, you let your eyes rest on the slow rhythm of morning in the highlands, the steady flow of people with baskets, jars, and bundles, all moving at their own deliberate pace. You sit on a low wooden stool, the kind with 3 uneven legs, in front of the narrow table where your ledger rests. The cover is worn soft from years of handling, the leather darkened at the edges where your fingers have often held it. The pages inside are thick, slightly yellowed parchment, each one covered in careful lines of ink. Some entries are fresh, the black still rich and sharp. Others have faded into brown, their strokes softened by time and handling. This ledger holds more than numbers. It holds the record of promises, of bargains struck between families, and of the unspoken trust that such agreements will be honored. Each name, each mark, tells a story of goats counted in a dusty pen, of bolts of cloth laid out for inspection, of bracelets weighed on a simple scale. You have memorized many of them without meaning to. The patterns of the handwriting, the shape of certain letters. We hope this little journey through time has been a pleasant one for you. These stay in your mind long after the transaction is done. Share, or leave your kind comment and check its tip. And make sure it will need sharpening before you write again for the next unhurried ink jar, sealed with a cork and feels cool in your hand as you tilt it gently. You know the ink inside is made from soot mixed with gum, arabic, and water, a mixture both simple and stubborn in its permanence. It will outlast some of the people whose names you write. As you turn the pages, you pause at the last entry from yesterday. It is for a smaller dowry, 2 goats, a woven cloak, and a set of clay jars for storing butter. The agreement had been reached quickly, almost too quickly, with only mild haggling over the number of jars. You remember the way the groom's uncle had smiled, showing the gap where a tooth was missing, when he agreed to add an extra jar to please the bride's mother. Outside, a voice calls to someone down the street. A mule brays in reply, as if impatient with the delay. The sounds remind you that the market will already be filling. If you are to meet the families as planned, you will need to carry your ledger with you, ready to note the terms as they are decided. You tie the leather cord around it, wrapping it twice so it will not come loose. Then you slip it into the cloth satchel that hangs from your shoulder. Alongside it, you place your pen, the ink jar, and a small knife for sharpening the pen's tip. These are the tools of your work, more precious to you than silver ornaments or a fine mule. Without them, the agreements could not be written. And without the written word, there would be no certainty to carry home at the end of the day. Historians still debate whether these ledgers were always kept by the same negotiator for many years or whether the role shifted between trusted elders. In your case, you have kept this ledger for a long while, the same careful hand marking each page. You know the weight of it, as you know the weight of your own thoughts, both steady, both familiar. The morning air drifts in from the open window, carrying the scent of roasted coffee beans from a neighbor's house. The smell is deep and earthy, with a hint of spice that makes your mouth water. Soon, you will be offered a cup during the talks. It will be hot, bitter, and strong enough to sharpen your thinking for the long hours ahead. You close the ledger gently, feeling the texture of the leather under your fingertips. The surface is warm now from your touch. Outside, the sounds grow louder, footsteps on stone, the scrape of a wooden wheel, the murmur of greetings. The market waits, and so do the families. You rise, lift the satchel over your shoulder, and step toward the door. You step into the narrow lane that leads downhill to the market. The cobbles set at uneven angles, each stone polished by years of sandals, hooves, and wheels. Your pace is unhurried. You prefer to let the market gather around you the way dawn gathers color, piece by piece, until the whole scene settles into motion. The first stall you pass is little more than a reed mat spread on a low platform. Yet the woman behind it sits with the stillness of a carved saint. Before her are shallow baskets mounded with grain teff in fine dark sprinkles like scattered pepper, barley with its pale fat kernels, and a smaller heap of wheat, the grains longer, catching the light in small glints. She holds a gourd measure in one hand and a flat spoon of wood in the other, not looking up as 2 sisters argue softly about the price of teff for their bread. You pause long enough to watch the measuring. The gourd dips, the grains pour with a dry whisper, and the seller levels the surface with the flat spoon in one smooth stroke. A second scoop for fairness, a tap for luck. The sound is soothing. The texture of the market itself counted, leveled, settled. You note the price they agree on and tuck it away in your working memory. Being a dowry negotiator means knowing what a fair measure costs on a fair morning. Farther along, smoke curls from a clay stove set on 3 stones. A young man fans the coals with a palm leaf, and the air fills with a nutty scent of roasting barley. Beside the fire sits a shallow pan with a few spiced coffee beans meant for the afternoon. You don't take a cup now, though the bitterness would brighten the edges of your thoughts. You prefer to keep your mouth empty before a day of speaking. A man leans on a stick and complains that last season's rains were brief on the upland slopes, and the barley came thin. He says it as if the weather will come back to apologize. You nod without answering and move on. A pair of boys hurry past you carrying a skin bag of fresh milk that sloshes with every clumsy step. They laugh when a drop splashes on one boy's ankle. They will take it to the butter seller, whose stall is shaded by a stitched awning of patched cloth. There, a set of gourds is lined in a neat row, each blackened by smoke and stoppered with carved wood. When the woman opens one, the scent is creamy and slightly tangy, touched by the smoke from the rafters where the gourds had hung to cure. She lifts a round of butter with a scoop and sets it on a cool stone slab, then presses it with flat palms to shape it into a clean dome. You remember, not without fondness, how some people tuck sprigs of fragrant leaves into their butter roux, or a bit of wild basil, so it tastes like a hillside after rain. A small boy stands nearby, clutching a single coin and, after a long, serious silence, trades it for a thumb-sized piece wrapped in a strip of leaf. Past the butter comes color. Bolts of woven cotton lie in careful stacks on a mat, white with narrow bands of indigo, cream with faint ochre stripes, and a length of bright cloth whose weft carries small red diamonds only visible when the sun catches it. The weaver sits cross-legged, threading a shuttle through stretched warp on a ground loom, his bare feet steadying the world he is making line by line. You pause to feel the cloth, squeezing it between finger and thumb, testing for tightness, checking the selvage for a firm, unbroken edge. Woven cotton will likely appear in today's bargaining. You note which lengths might suit a bride's chest and which are better for daily wear. A knot of elders stands to one side, not in any stall at all, just in a patch of shade where the stone wall holds last night's coolness. They speak almost without moving their mouths, trading names, landmarkers, and prices in a tone that never rises above a hum. One of them glances at you and lifts his chin in greeting. You return the gesture. It is not yet time to join them. It is time to walk, listen, and let the market announce what it has and what it lacks. Mainstream fact sits quietly in the corners here. Salt bars, a mole wrapped in cloth against chipping, are as good as coin for many people and travel the highland roads from distant flats. You see a trader set a bundle of them down with the care one gives to brittle eggs, then slice off a sliver to show a buyer the clean, white grain inside. The buyer rubs it between finger and thumb, nods, and tucks his beard with satisfaction. Historians still argue whether standard measures for these salt bars were enforced across regions in the 15th century or varied according to local custom, and this morning will not settle the question. You have seen bars that seem short and bars that seem long, and agreements that treat both as fair, so long as everyone smiles at the end. Quirky details, the kind you file away without meaning to, shimmer at the edges. A girl sells honey from a comb set in a shallow bowl, and someone pays for a taste not with coin but with 3 needles of bright metal, tucked in a fold of cloth. A musician with a small one-string fiddle hums a slow tune, then pauses to barter the bow for a spoonful of clarified butter to shine the horsehair. A toothless man claims that a certain red-threaded cloth keeps jackals from bothering your goats if it is tied to the gate. He says it with the certainty of someone who has never raised a goat in his life. You pass the potter's stall where clay jars stand in a row like short, round soldiers. Their bellies shine with a thin slip, and a few are stamped with small designs: cross, circle, a sprig of leaves. You tap one lightly. The sound is clean and hollow. Good for grain, you think, or for storing butter against the warmth of the afternoon. The potter's hands are still smudged with clay, and when he gestures, pale dust rises from his wrists like a blessing. At the lane's turn, 2 women arrange baskets of dried peppers, the red piling up like embers. One of them laughs and says the peppers are as sharp as a quarrelsome aunt. The other says nothing, just measures with a swiftness that could cut skin. You feel the sting in the air, as though it were already on your tongue. The market widens into a small square, where the church wall throws a long triangle of shade across the stones. A priest passes, eyes lowered, and the murmuring around you briefly softens. You notice the neat sweep of the square center, where no stall dares to creep. A little island of bare stone as if kept for the breeze alone. On a low step, a scribe has set up a plank and offers letter writing for those who need it. He glances at your satchel and gives a tiny nod of professional kinship, a look that says both of you know how much ink can anchor a day. As you cross the square, you let your palm pass over the cool, rough face of the church wall. Grains of stone rasp your skin in a way that is almost pleasant. The bell above you marks a small hour, not the formal one you await, but a soft reminder that mornings are not endless. A child shrieks joy, not fear, as a chicken escapes a woven crate and flaps between baskets of onions and coils of rope. 3 people move at once to catch it. Nobody does. The chicken disappears around a corner to write its own agreement with the world. You make no purchases. That is not your role today. But you count things in your quiet way: grain measures, butter domes, folded cloth, the number of goats you glimpse at the lane's far edge tethered in the shade. All of it is the language you will speak soon. put into figures that feel fair when said aloud. You pass the last stalls, where the stones slope upward again, and the air cools a fraction as the lane narrows. The market's murmur drifts behind you like water in a slow channel. At the crest of the lane, you pause and look back. The square lies like a woven mat thrown over the hillside, each stall a small, bright motif in a larger pattern. Today's dowry will be drawn from this pattern grain, cloth, animals, ornaments, nothing magical, nothing surprising, only the ordinary wealth of people who rise early and sleep tired. You shift the strap of your satchel, breathe the light spice of pepper and smoke that lingers on your sleeve, and turn toward the gate where business waits with folded hands. You reach the church gate just as the light changes, sun slanting in from the east, so that the carved wooden panels glow along their edges. The gate is tall, built to impress more than to keep out. It stands slightly open, revealing a glimpse of the inner courtyard, where a few elders already wait. The air here feels quieter, the hum of the market fading to a softer murmur behind you. Only the rustle of robes, the clink of a walking stick against stone, and the faint creak of the gate's hinges disturb the stillness. Two elders stand closest to the entrance, both in white cotton wraps that fall in long folds to their ankles. One leans on a staff polished smooth from decades of use. The other holds a string of prayer beads, working them slowly through his fingers without looking down. You incline your head in greeting, lowering your gaze just enough to show respect without losing sight of their expressions. The staff holder's eyes soften in return, a small acknowledgement. The bead holder's mouth twitches upward in the barest smile. These greetings are as much a part of the negotiation as the counting of goods. To speak without first offering the proper courtesies would make the rest of the day brittle. The elders know it, and so do you. A hand to your chest, a low word of blessing, a pause before passing it. It is not wasted time. It is the frame into which the rest of the day's work will be set. Beyond the gate, a wide stone path leads toward the church doors, shaded on one side by a row of tall, narrow trees. Their leaves shift gently, scattering light and shadow across the paving stones. A bench sits under the largest tree, and an old man rests there, his chin tucked to his chest, eyes closed. He is not asleep. His lips move in the slow rhythm of prayer, but the peaceful stillness around him makes it seem as if he could be. The smell here is different from the market. It is cooler, touched by the faint resinous scent of frankincense. Somewhere inside the church, an acolyte is burning it in a low-bellied censer. The smoke curls out through the high windows in thin threads, catching the sun so that the air itself seems layered with gold. You know this scent will follow you into the talks, mingling with the sharper smells of goats, leather, and coffee. Near the steps, two women stand talking in low voices. One wears a headcloth embroidered with narrow bands of green and gold. The other's is plain white, but neatly folded. They glance at you and then look away, the conversation resuming in the quiet, deliberate tone that tells you it is serious. Perhaps they are related to the bride's family. You note their presence without intruding. An elder you know well approaches from the far side of the courtyard. His walk is steady despite the years, and his robe is freshly washed, the folds crisp. He greets you with your name spoken slowly, as if tasting each syllable. You answer in kind, adding the honorific title that acknowledges his standing. He gestures toward the steps, and you fall into step beside him. Historians still argue whether such negotiations in 15th century Ethiopia always began in the presence of church elders, or if some were handled entirely in private homes. You have seen both, but there is a weight to those conducted within sight of the church, an unspoken sense that the agreement will be bound not only by ink and seal, but by the approval of those who serve here. You and the elder pause at the top of the steps. From here, you can see the valley beyond the market, the hills rolling out toward the horizon. The roofs of the lower houses glint in the light, their thatch catching the sun's brightness. The elder murmurs something about the season's barley, and whether the rains will come early this year. You answer without hurry, knowing that the talk of weather is less about weather and more about easing the mind before weightier matters. A small bell sounds from inside, not the great bell that calls the faithful, but a handbell rung by an acolyte. It signals that the appointed hour is near. You feel the day begin to narrow its focus, from the wide scatter of the market to the tight circle of the courtyard. Soon you will be seated, your ledger open, the first cautious words of the negotiation drifting into the stillness between you and the families. You follow the elder toward the shaded side of the courtyard, where a low table has been set with a jug of water, small cups, and a folded cloth. The cups are made of horn, polished smooth, their edges slightly irregular. A boy hovers nearby, ready to pour when asked. You accept a seat on a carved wooden chair, the surface worn satiny by years of use. The elder takes the chair beside you, and together you look out toward the gate, waiting for the others to arrive. The first sound that breaks the still air is the deep, resonant toll of the church bell overhead. It rolls down into the courtyard like a slow wave, swelling and then fading before the next strike. Each ring marks not just the hour, but the shift from idle talk to the day's real business. In this place, bells are both clock and voice, telling the valley when to pray, when to work, and when to gather for matters of weight. You let the sound settle over you, the vibration lingering in your ribs as if you had swallowed a fragment of bronze. The elders around you seem to move in time with it, adjusting their seats, straightening the folds of their robes, leaning forward just enough to signal readiness. A few nod to one another in silent agreement that the moment has come. From beyond the gate, the market's hum grows softer, as though it too knows to yield to the bell. The cries of sellers fade, replaced by the occasional bleat of a goat, or the distant thud of a wooden mallet on a pestle. Even the wind through the trees seems to slow, its rustle thinner and more deliberate. One of the older men at the far end of the courtyard closes his eyes during the last peal, lips moving in a silent blessing. You watch the sunlight slide along the polished surface of his staff, a slow golden inching that seems in no hurry to leave. When the final strike fades, there is a pause, the kind of quiet that holds itself carefully. No one speaks immediately. The absence of words feels ceremonial, as though the silence is part of the hour itself. Only after the span of a slow breath does the bead-holding elder at your right murmur something about the journey the families have made. You answer with a small nod and a low-voiced acknowledgement that the road here is not an easy one. The bell's tone still seems to linger in your mind as you glance toward the ledger in your lap. It remains closed for now. The ink will not run away if you wait a little longer. You know that the beginning of a negotiation is never marked by the first question or the first figure. It is marked by this shared stillness, a mutual recognition that the words about to be spoken will matter long after the sound of them has faded. Historians still debate whether the bells in rural highland churches of this century were cast locally or brought from distant centers of trade. Some records mention traveling bell makers who worked their craft in villages for weeks, melting and shaping the bronze on site. Others insist that such work was too specialized, that bells came only from certain towns with skilled foundries. You have never seen a bell cast yourself, but you have heard enough to imagine the heat and the glow, the liquid metal poured into waiting molds like sunlight trapped in a vessel. The boy with the jug steps forward quietly, filling your cup with water before moving to the others. The horn cup feels cool in your hand, the polished surface almost slick. You sip slowly, tasting the faint mineral edge of water drawn from the stone cisterns near the church. It is clean and steady on the tongue, the kind of water that makes you think of shaded courtyards and narrow mountain springs. As you set the cup down, movement stirs near the gate. Two men enter first, their robes marked with faint dust from the road. They pause to greet the elders at the threshold, touching their hands briefly to their chests. Behind them, a woman in a layered cotton dress follows, her headcloth falling in a long drape over one shoulder. Her eyes flicker toward you and then away, careful not to meet your gaze for too long. You watch them approach in measured steps, pausing every few paces for a brief exchange with those they pass. No one rushes this part. The greetings must be given their due time, just as the bell was allowed its space to speak. Each hand clasped, each word spoken, is another stitch in the fabric of the day's agreement. The elders on either side of you lean forward slightly as the arriving party draws near. Their expressions are neutral, their hands resting lightly on their knees. You mirror them, keeping your posture open but still. The rhythm of the bell remains in you, a slow, steady beat beneath the surface, guiding you toward the first turn of conversation. The first words of the day's talk are not about marriage, nor about goats, nor about bolts of woven cloth. They are about the weather. Always the weather. You sit with the elders under the slanting shade of the awning as a small clay brazier is set before you, a thin stream of fragrant smoke curling upward. The boy tending it places a narrow-necked pot over the embers, the dark coffee inside already giving off a smell both sharp and earthy. Your opposite number, the negotiator for the groom's family, sits across from you. His robe is plain but neatly wrapped, the folds falling with the precision of someone who has done this many times. He is older than you by perhaps a decade, his beard salted with white. His eyes are slow-moving, like someone accustomed to weighing not only words but silences. Before the coffee is poured, he remarks on how the highland nights have been cooler than usual for this time of year. You answer that the barley in the terraces to the east seems to like the chill. He nods, as if this is an important point of agreement. Neither of you speaks of the dowry yet. That will come only after the cups have been filled and at least one story about the planting season has been told. The boy pours the first cup for the eldest among you, letting the dark liquid fall in a thin ribbon from a height. It swirls into the horn cup without a splash. The elder sips, nods approval, and only then does the boy move to pour for the rest. When your cup is set before you, you wrap your fingers around it, letting the warmth seep into your hands. The first taste is strong, bitter enough to tighten the back of your mouth, but it loosens as you swallow, leaving behind the faint sweetness of the roasted bean. You take a second sip, slower, watching the smoke from the brazier fold and drift in the light breeze. Somewhere nearby, a dove coos, its call a low, hollow note that blends with the quiet conversation. Quirky customs attach themselves to such moments. You've seen some negotiators insist on sipping 3 cups before any serious terms are spoken. Others count the clinks of the horn cup against the table, declaring it a sign of fortune if the sound is deep and even. Today's elder simply sets his cup down with a soft thud and leans back, ready to begin. Historians still argue whether coffee in 15th-century Ethiopia was always prepared in this formal way during negotiations, or if it was a luxury reserved for special agreements. Some point to records suggesting it was an everyday drink in the highlands by this time. Others argue that the elaborate brewing, the incense, and the measured pouring were reserved for gatherings where reputation and outcome mattered. You lean toward the latter, having seen many mornings where water alone was served when the stakes were low. Your opposite number glances at the satchel by your side. It is a small gesture, but it says plainly enough that the day's work is about to start. You nod once and take another sip before setting your cup aside. The brazier's smoke has grown sweeter now, the frankincense resin melting into a slow, steady curl that frames the space between you like an invisible wall. A goat bleats faintly from somewhere outside the gate. You hear the shift of hooves on stone, the sound carried by the open air. Someone murmurs about the price of animals this season, and at last the thread of conversation draws closer to the matter at hand. The first mention of the bride's dowry slips into the air as naturally as the breeze, almost as though it had been waiting just behind the talk of barley and rain. The coffee cools as the voices warm, each sentence still wrapped in courtesy but carrying more weight now. You listen closely, not only to the words but to the pauses between them. The day is still young, and the first measure of agreement is not yet taken, but the shape of it has begun to form in the quiet space beneath the awning. The first goods to be spoken of are not coins or silver, but cloth. Yet before you can put ink to parchment, you must see the cloth for yourself. The bride's family produces the linen chest with a kind of ceremonial slowness, as if each step in its arrival carries meaning. 2 men lift it together, their hands gripping the carved handles, and set it down with a muted thud on the stone floor of the courtyard. The chest is long and low, made of dark wood smoothed by years of touch, its lid held by a simple bronze latch. You rise from your seat, smoothing the front of your robe, and step closer. The latch clicks softly as one of the men opens it. The smell that escapes is faint but distinct linen stored for seasons, touched by cedar shavings and the ghost of past incense. Inside, the folded layers lie in a pale stack, each piece separated by thin sheets of woven cotton to keep them from creasing too sharply. You take the top layer gently in both hands and lift it into the light. The fabric is fine but sturdy, the weave even, the selvage smooth. You rub a corner lightly between your fingers, feeling for the softness that comes from careful washing and sun bleaching. The threads catch the light in a way that tells you they were spun thin, then woven on a well-tuned loom. No stray ends poke from the surface. This is linen meant to last, not the rough weave for everyday garments. You check the embroidery next, small, careful stitches forming patterns along the edge. Here is a border of repeating diamonds in pale indigo. There, a narrow braid of red and green threads worked so finely you can barely see where one color ends and the other begin. The work is even, with no gaps where the needle might have skipped. Such details are more than decoration. They are proof of the family's investment in the bride's future household. You set the first piece aside and lift another, heavier this time, meant for bedding or perhaps for curtains to hang inside a marriage room. The dye along its edge is deeper, a muted rust color, the kind that comes from soaking yarn in crushed madder root. You know the smell earthy and slightly metallic, though here it is only a trace. Historians still debate whether the embroidery patterns of 15th century Ethiopian highlands carried specific meanings for marriage, like warnings or blessings stitched into the fabric. Some argue that certain motifs were thought to guard against illness or misfortune. Others insist they were chosen simply for beauty, without symbolic weight. You suspect both can be true, depending on the family and the teller. You glance toward your opposite number across the table. He nods once, acknowledging the quality without overpraising it. The elders murmur quietly to one another, their eyes moving from the cloth to your face, waiting to see how you will mark this in your ledger. The quirky detail of the morning emerges when the bride's aunt, standing nearby, insists that one of the smaller pieces be refolded exactly the way she prepared it. She steps forward, her hands moving with precise authority, folding the cloth corner to corner, smoothing it flat with her palm. The movement is swift and final, as if daring anyone to disturb it again. No one does. You begin to note the details in your ledger, the number of pieces, the type of weave, the presence of embroidery, the colors used. Your reed pen moves slowly, the ink flowing steadily onto the parchment in small, neat lines. You leave space for the other goods yet to be discussed. The linen is only one part of the whole. When you close the ledger for now, the chest is latched again and set to one side, waiting to be carried away when all is decided. You return to your seat, the texture of the fabric still lingering in your fingertips, and the faint smell of cedar following you like a quiet reminder of the value just placed on the table. The talk moves from fabric to livestock, as it often does. A young man from the bride's family leads you toward the edge of the courtyard, where a narrow side gate opens onto a small pen. The air changes the moment you pass through. The scent of pressed earth, warm animal musk, and the faint tang of hay fills your nose. Sunlight here is brighter, unfiltered by the awnings of the meeting space, and it catches in the dust that stirs under your sandals. The goats are waiting, a dozen of them perhaps, though you do not count yet. They stand in loose groups, their ears twitching, their eyes alert in the way of animals that notice everything but react to very little. A few shift from hoof to hoof, small puffs of dust rising beneath them. Others chew slowly on coarse stalks, their jaws moving in patient circles. The young man gestures for you to step closer. You approach the first goat, a sturdy female with a clean coat, the color of pale ash. She flicks her tail once, but doesn't move away. You glance over her body, noting the fullness of her belly, the smooth curve of her horns, the even growth of her hooves. These are the signs you look for, not just size or age, but the steadiness of health that promises milk and strong offspring. One by one, you pass your eyes over the rest. Some coats shine in the light, the fine hairs catching on the breeze. Others bear the marks of recent brushing, faint lines where a comb has passed. You crouch briefly beside a smaller goat, its coat mottled black and white, and watch the steady blink of its eyes. The animal leans slightly toward you, curious but cautious, then shifts back. Goats are more than wealth here. They are proof of a family's care. A pen in good condition, animals with trimmed hooves and smooth coats. These are signs that speak as loudly as coin. The pen's low fence is made of woven branches, sturdy but flexible, and in the corner a clay basin holds water still cool from the morning. You make a slow circle of the enclosure, your opposite number doing the same from the other side. Now and then you glance at each other, silently acknowledging a particularly fine specimen or a smaller one that might not weigh heavily in the count. When you finally begin the tally, it is with the deliberate pace expected in such matters. Historians still argue whether dowry livestock in this period was valued strictly by number, or if certain animals, those of unusual color, or those with a history of producing strong kids, could tip the balance of an agreement. You've seen both approaches. In some talks, a single prized goat could stand for 3 lesser ones. In others, all were counted the same, their individual traits noted only in the margins. A quirky moment interrupts your inspection when one goat bolder than the rest pushes its nose against your satchel. You lift it gently away, but the animal persists, as if certain that somewhere inside you've hidden a handful of fresh leaves. One of the elders chuckles, murmuring that it has a nose for ink, which would make it a poor scribe but an honest judge of character. You finish your notes in the ledger, the total number, the general health, a brief mention of any standout traits. The goats, satisfied with the minimal disturbance, return to their slow grazing and shifting. The young man closes the pen gate behind you, the latch clicking softly into place. Back in the shaded courtyard, you take your seat again. The warmth of the pen still lingers in your skin, the smell of hay and animal clinging faintly to your robe. These will fade, but the record you've written will not. The next item on the table is sweetness honey, from the slopes beyond the valley. It arrives in a shallow woven basket, lined with broad leaves to keep the combs from sticking. The man who carries it sets it down gently, as if the contents were sleeping. The air shifts immediately. Even before the lid is lifted, you can smell it thick, floral, and faintly sharp in the back of your nose. When the covering leaves are drawn back, the light catches on the honey's surface in small, glistening pools between the wax cells. Some combs are a pale gold, almost white, from newer flowers. Others are amber, holding the memory of a season's worth of blooms. The wax edges glisten where they have been cut, and tiny beads of honey swell as if to escape. You lean forward, letting the scent fill your chest. There is the sweetness of highland flowers, wild basil, acacia, and something you can't name but have smelled on warm afternoons in the hills. Beeswax gives it a grounding weight, a reminder that sweetness is always made with labor. The elder presenting it speaks softly of the hives, how they are kept in hollowed logs, stacked near the terraces where flowering shrubs are planted to feed them. He speaks of climbing the hillside paths to check on them, of waiting until the season has turned before taking the combs. His voice has the tone of someone talking about kin, not possessions. You reach out and lift one piece, holding it carefully between your fingers so the honey does not spill. It is heavier than it looks, the comb dense and warm from the sun. You tilt it slightly, watching the honey move in slow glints between the cells. It smells richer up close, almost like dried fruit. Quirky traditions linger around honey in dowries. You have heard of families who insist on presenting the combs with a sprig of flowering basil tucked in, to keep the sweetness alive. Others place the combs in clay jars sealed with beeswax and a coin pressed into the top, said to ensure plenty in the marriage. Today, the combs are plain, without garnish, unadorned proof of the family's careful keeping. Historians still argue whether honey in the 15th century Ethiopian highlands was valued more for its sweetness or for its role in brewing tej, the golden honey wine used in feasts and ceremonies. Some say its worth was mostly as food. Others insist its ceremonial use made it far more valuable in social terms. You know from experience that its ability to end a hard day with sweetness gives it weight in both accounts. You set the comb back into its leaf-lined bed and make your notes in the ledger: quantity, color, condition. Your pen leaves small dark shapes on the parchment, but in your mind, the entry is bright and gold. As the basket is moved aside, a faint drop of honey falls to the stone floor. A boy rushes forward to wipe it away with a cloth, then licks his finger before his mother's glance warns him to behave. The elders exchange quiet smiles at the small breach of formality, but no one scolds. Sweetness has its own forgiveness. You close the ledger for now, the smell of honey still hanging in the air. It mingles with the fainter scent of frankincense from the brazier and the dust of the courtyard, a reminder that even in the most measured of negotiations, there are moments meant simply to be enjoyed. The honey is carried away, and the conversation turns to weaving, not the finished cloth you saw earlier, but the act itself, a sign of the household's skill and endurance. At a gesture from one of the elders, you are led to the shaded side of the courtyard where a ground loom has been set up. The weaver sits cross-legged before it, his bare feet anchoring the warp threads stretched tightly between two wooden beams. The scene is quiet, except for the soft, rhythmic sound of the shuttle passing back and forth. Each pass lays a line of thread across the warp, and with every pull of the beater, the cloth grows, a fraction of an inch at a time. The threads are the color of pale cream, with a thin stripe of indigo appearing every dozen rows. The sunlight, filtering through the awning, catches on the indigo, making it glow faintly against the muted cotton. You watch the movement for a while, the weaver's right hand guiding the shuttle through the opening between the warp threads, his left drawing the beater toward him with a steady pull. His face is calm, focused not on speed but on consistency. Every row matches the last, every edge smooth and unbroken. You kneel closer to see the selvage. It is firm, the edge threads twisted slightly to keep them from fraying. Such work takes patience, and patience is a kind of wealth in itself. A badly woven edge means the cloth will unravel sooner, and a marriage built on unraveling goods is a poor one. Quirky practices surround weaving in these hills. You've heard of some weavers humming the same tune for every cloth they make for a dowry, believing it ties the marriage to a song. Others bury a pebble from their family's land under the loom before starting, so the cloth remembers where it came from. Today, you see no pebble, but you notice the weaver has tied a small strip of dyed cloth around his wrist, perhaps for luck, or simply to keep the thread from catching on his skin. Historians still argue whether weaving for dowries in the 15th-century Ethiopian highlands was primarily a female skill, or if men too regularly took part in the work. Some records suggest men wove larger household cloths, while women focused on finer garments. Others suggest the division was far less rigid. Here, before you, sits a man weaving what will likely become part of the bride's store, and no one treats it as unusual. When the weaver pauses to adjust the tension of the warp, you reach out and touch the finished portion of the cloth. It is smooth but strong, with that faint resistance of new cotton that will soften after a few washings. You imagine it as a table covering, or perhaps a garment, or even as part of the bedding in the bride's new home. Your opposite number leans in to inspect it as well. His fingers linger a moment, then he nods without comment, a gesture that says it will be counted fairly. You take your pen and note the length already woven, the stripe pattern, and the skill of the selvage. You leave a small space to add more if the family chooses to contribute further pieces before the agreement is sealed. The weaver resumes his work. The shuttles back and forth sound like breathing in thread. You step back toward your seat, the image of the indigo stripe still resting in your mind. A quiet line running through the fabric of the day. The cloth is set aside, and now the talk turns to silver. From a small leather pouch, the bride's uncle draws out a bundle wrapped in soft cotton. He unfolds it slowly, revealing a pair of bracelets lying side by side. Even in the shade, they catch the light in clean, bright arcs. The silver is polished smooth, with no tarnish to cloud the surface, and each bracelet bears a faint line of engraving running along its outer curve. You pick one up carefully. It is heavier than it appears, the kind of weight that tells you it is solid, not hollowed to save on metal. The silver is cool against your palm at first, then warms quickly in your grasp. You turn it, watching the way the engraved line catches the light, a simple pattern, repeating triangles so fine they could almost be mistaken for shadows. These are not everyday adornments. Such bracelets are worn on festival days, at weddings, and during the rare times when formality demands the best of what one owns. Their presence here in the dowry signals both generosity and expectation. Generosity in giving them, expectation that they will be cared for and brought out to show the family's continued standing. The uncle explains that the bracelets belong to the bride's grandmother, passed down with the instruction that they be given when the time was right. His voice holds no pride, only the weight of fulfilling that instruction. You sense that refusing them, or even undervaluing them, would be taken as an insult to the memory as much as to the family. Quirky customs cling to silver like shadows. You've heard of bracelets being tested by dropping them onto a flat stone. If the sound is clear and ringing, the silver is good. If dull, it is mixed with lesser metals. You've also seen families insist on tapping them together before placing them in a dowry, claiming it wakes the metal to serve the new household. Today, there is no such tapping, only the measured inspection under your eye. Historians still argue whether silver in this century came more often from local mines or from trade routes stretching toward the Red Sea. Some say the highland mines could meet local needs. Others insist much of it arrived by caravan, passing through many hands before it reached the jeweler's bench. You cannot say for certain where this pair began its journey, but you can see that the hand that shaped them knew both strength and restraint. You set the bracelet back beside its twin and note them in your ledger pair of silver bracelets. Engraved, good weight, fine condition. Your pen makes a soft scratching sound in the stillness. As the bracelets are wrapped again in their cloth and placed back into the pouch, one of the elders remarks quietly that silver, unlike grain or cloth, does not spoil with time. You glance at the faint reflection of your own hand in the polished curve and think there is truth in that, though silver, too, can be lost, traded, or stolen, its value shifting with the fortunes of the household that holds it. The pouch is drawn closed with a neat knot, and the uncle sets it beside him on the mat. The moment passes without fanfare, the silver now just another line in the day's growing record, yet its cool weight seems to linger in your palm even as you fold your hands again. The silver has been noted, but the voices in the courtyard shift as the groom's uncle clears his throat. His robe, loosely wrapped, stirs in the breeze as he leans forward. His hands rest flat on his knees, fingers spread as though bracing himself against the weight of the words he is about to release. He speaks slowly, with the measured rhythm of someone who knows that a negotiation is as much about tone as it is about content. His voice is not raised, but there is a firmness beneath it, a low hum of insistence that each syllable should be heard without hurry. He begins by praising the quality of the goods. So far, linen, goats, honey, cloth, silver. He names them one by one, as though laying them in an invisible row on the stone floor. And then, with only the slightest shift in his breath, he speaks of what is not present. He says it without accusation, yet the space left by the missing items is made visible in the air between you. The list he gives is not long: a second mule, more grain for the bride's household, a chest of spices to mark the first year of the marriage. These were not promised before, but in the uncle's telling, they are reasonable, even necessary to balance the scales. You do not answer at once. Your role here is to listen first, to hear not only the words but the shape of the request. His gaze holds yours, steady but without hostility, the way one might watch a scribe counting coin alert for accuracy, open to correction. Quirky habits sometimes emerge in these moments. Some negotiators will lightly tap their knee with their fingers while speaking, marking each point. Others lean back and speak toward the sky, as if consulting a higher witness. This uncle does neither. He leans forward, anchored in the present, his hands unmoving as he makes his case. Historians still argue whether the role of the groom's uncle in 15th-century Ethiopian dowry negotiations was formalized by custom or simply taken up by whoever in the family had the most skill in persuasion. Some accounts suggest it was a near-official position, expected and prepared for. Others see it as a practical choice, a matter of who could speak without letting anger or pride overrun the talk. You suspect it is both ritual and practicality braided together. When he finishes, there is a pause. You shift your gaze toward the elders, whose expressions remain unreadable. Your opposite number meets your eyes briefly, offering the faintest raise of his eyebrows, a gesture that could mean agreement, challenge, or merely acknowledgement that the game has moved forward. You make a small note in the ledger, the uncle's requests, worded neutrally, leaving space for adjustments. The sound of the pen on parchment is soft but steady, as if to remind everyone that what is said here becomes part of a lasting record. The uncle leans back at last, his hands leaving his knees to fold loosely in his lap. His breath eases out, and the moment of tension settles into a quieter hum. You return your pen to its rest, the ink drying in fine, dark lines as the conversation drifts to lighter things for a moment. Weather, travel, the condition of the road, but you know the weight of his words will stay in the air until the final terms are sealed. The elders shift slightly, and the brazier's smoke drifts toward you again, curling in a thin, lazy spiral. It is time to set the first figures to parchment. You lift the ledger onto your lap and untie the leather cord, the familiar weight of it steady in your hands. The reed pen rests where you left it, its tip still dark from earlier notes. You dip it lightly into the ink jar, letting the excess fall back with a faint glisten. Your opposite number watches without speaking. His eyes follow the movement of the pen as you write the date at the top of a fresh page. The parchment takes the ink cleanly, the strokes dark and sharp. Beneath the date, you begin the careful listing. Linen chest, 12 goats, honeycombs from the highland slopes, 1 length of woven cloth with indigo stripes, a pair of engraved silver bracelets. Each item gets its own line, each line its own space to breathe. The elders lean forward slightly to watch the ink form the shapes of their goods. No one interrupts. The sound of the pen is faint but distinct, a slow scratch like a beetle moving over dry wood. When you reach the goats, you note their number and condition, adding a brief mark beside the line to indicate one particularly fine doe. At the honey, you mention the pale gold and the amber combs, not because the color changes the value, but because it captures the memory of what was shown. Quirky practices surround the writing itself. Some negotiators leave deliberate gaps between lines so that later additions can be made without crowding. Others write in a steady column down the left side, leaving the right half of the page for adjustments, disputes, or blessings added later by a priest. Today, you keep your spacing generous, the lines evenly measured, the ink drying in neat strokes. Historians still argue whether these written records were always stored in the church after the agreement, or if they sometimes remained with the negotiator. Some say the church held them as a safeguard, a public memory for when disputes arose. Others claim they were private documents, returned to the families once both sides were satisfied. You have seen both, and you write each one as though it might be read aloud in either place. You pause after the first list is complete, lifting your gaze to meet your opposite number's eyes. He nods once, then tilts his head slightly toward the uncle who spoke earlier. You add a second section beneath the goods already agreed. Mule, additional grain, chest of spices requested. You leave them unnumbered for now, neither accepted nor refused, only recorded. When you place the pen down, the elder nearest you murmurs a blessing under his breath, a sound like wind slipping through reeds. You close the ledger just enough to keep the page clean, but leave it within reach. The ink will dry quickly in this air, but not so quickly that care can be ignored. The brazier's smoke has shifted again, drifting toward the open gate. Beyond it, you hear a snatch of laughter from the market, a faint reminder that life continues outside the circle of this talk. You rest your hands on the closed ledger, feeling the smooth leather beneath your palms. The day is moving forward, the record already carrying more weight than the goods it describes. A bundle of salt blocks is brought forth next, wrapped carefully in a rough cloth. The saltamole is heavy in your hands, its weight dense and satisfying. These blocks have traveled far, from the lowland salt pans where the sun beats down hard and the air tastes sharp with minerals. Each rectangular slab bears the marks of careful cutting, edges straight and clean. You unwrap one block slightly, feeling its cool surface. The grain is fine but compacted tightly by years of pressure. Salt is more than seasoning here. It is currency, a symbol of trade and trust between distant peoples. To receive it as part of a dowry is to accept not only a valuable good but a connection to the wider world beyond the mountains. The elder explaining its value speaks of caravans crossing desert sands, of men and camels moving slowly under a burning sun. He tells of salt's role in preserving meat, in curing hides, and in binding agreements with a weight as literal as any coin. You listen, noting how his voice carries pride in this humble mineral's power. Quirky customs sometimes involve tasting the salt before accepting it, a ritual that assures purity and honesty. Others mark the blocks with symbols or blessings, invoking protection over the families exchanging them. Today, the cloth wrapping bears a simple knot, nothing more, but the salt's weight seems to speak loudly enough. Historians still debate whether standardized sizes for these salt bars existed across 15th century Ethiopia or if local customs dictated their shape and weight. Some say traders agreed on certain lengths to ease exchange. Others point to evidence of variation, with families negotiating value based on local preference. You have seen both, and today's blocks seem to fit somewhere between the two. You make careful notes in your ledger, the number of blocks, their condition, and the story told by their edges. As you write, the sun shifts slightly, sending a warm line across the parchment that feels like a quiet encouragement. The bundle is wrapped again and set beside the other goods, waiting for the day's final reckoning. The time comes to break the talk with food. You and the elders gather under a broad awning that offers welcome shade from the climbing sun. A low wooden table is spread with thick slices of bread, dense and slightly sour from the slow fermentation common in these parts. The crust is cracked and well-baked, the crumb heavy and moist. Alongside the bread sits a shallow bowl of curdled milk, creamy and pale, its tang sharp against the warmth of the bread. You pick up a piece of bread, the weight comforting in your hand. The texture is coarse, each bite releasing a quiet burst of wheat flavor. Dipping it carefully into the milk, you let the cool liquid soften the crumb before you take a slow, thoughtful bite. The taste is simple, honest, a reminder of the steady rhythm of days spent in fields and kitchens far from grand courts. Around you, quiet conversation resumes. The elders speak softly of harvests past and those hoped for, of the quality of this season's barley and the care needed to preserve it through the winter. Your opposite number nods, accepting the pause as part of the day's flow, a time to rest, reflect, and gather strength for the talk still to come. Quirky customs linger even here. Some families insist on breaking bread in silence before any words are spoken, believing that shared food creates a bond stronger than any contract. Others sprinkle a pinch of salt on their slices first, a small ritual meant to invite protection and good fortune. Historians still debate how often such meals were shared during negotiations. Some suggest that breaking bread was a daily practice, a way to mark progress and maintain goodwill. Others believe it was reserved for only the most serious or difficult agreements. You have witnessed both, and today's simple meal feels like a quiet promise that the talks will continue with patience and care. You lean back slightly, savoring the lingering taste and the brief respite. The sun shifts through the leaves above, dappling the table with light and shadow as the day moves steadily forward. After the meal, you find yourself drawn to the mule tethered nearby. It stands quietly, its dark coat gleaming faintly in the afternoon light. The animal's ears flick at distant sounds, and its breath rises in soft puffs from flared nostrils. You step closer, running your hand gently along its side, feeling the warmth of muscle beneath the short hair. You lead the mule a few steps forward, testing its gait. Its step is firm and steady, the kind that can bear loads over rough mountain paths without faltering. You note the strength in its shoulders and the surety in its hooves. A good mule is a treasure in these parts, a companion for long journeys and a bearer of burdens too heavy for human hands alone. Your opposite number approaches, nodding in approval. The mule's value here is clear, a sign of readiness for travel and a pledge of support for the new household's future. This animal will carry goods, perhaps even the bride herself, from her family's home to her husband's, bridging not only distance but the joining of lives. Quirky customs sometimes involve brushing the mule with fresh herbs before a journey, believed to calm the animal and protect it from harm. Others tie small charms to its bridle for good luck. Today, the mule wears no such adornment, only a simple woven saddle blanket, its edges frayed from years of use. Historians still argue how much dowry animals like mules influenced marriage negotiations versus their role in everyday work. Some suggest their presence was mostly practical. Others see them as symbols of wealth and status, whose inclusion in a dowry carried social weight beyond their usefulness. You understand that, for families here, it is often both. You release the mule's reins and watch as it returns to its quiet stance, nostrils flaring once more in the cool mountain air. The day presses on, the ledger waiting for the next entry, and you prepare to record this gift with the care it deserves. Nearby, the soft murmur of a priest's voice draws your attention. He leans close to a seated elder, speaking in low tones that carry the weight of quiet counsel. His words are measured, his breath steady as he offers advice not on goods or numbers, but on fairness and peace. The priest's presence is a gentle reminder that these negotiations are more than commerce. They are a weaving of relationships meant to last. You catch fragments of his voice, phrases about balance and trust, the sacredness of promises made in the sight of God and community. His tone is neither harsh nor demanding, but carries an unspoken authority that bends the conversation toward harmony. The elders listen with bowed heads, absorbing the counsel as one might receive a blessing. Quirky customs sometimes see priests offering small tokens, a sprig of myrrh, a pinch of incense as seals of goodwill before final terms are set. Today, the priest carries nothing but words, but their weight seems to fill the space between speaker and listener. Historians still debate the extent of clerical involvement in dowry talks during the 15th century. Some records suggest priests played a central role in witnessing and endorsing agreements, while others portray them as peripheral, offering only occasional guidance. Your experience leans toward the former. Their quiet presence often shifts the tone, reminding all parties of the greater bonds at stake. As the priest's voice fades into the rustle of robes and shifting seats, you feel the subtle shift in the air. The talk resumes with renewed care, each sentence more thoughtful, each pause more deliberate. The day's rhythm moves steadily forward, guided by voices both heard and unseen. You rise and approach a loom set near the courtyard's edge, where threads of indigo and ochre stretch tightly between two wooden beams. The loom's frame is simple but sturdy, shaped from local hardwood that has darkened with age and use. Under the shade of a wide cloth awning, the weaver works quietly, his hands steady as they pass the shuttle back and forth with practiced ease. The threads catch the dappled sunlight, their colors rich and earthy. The indigo glows faintly, a deep blue that seems almost black in shadow, while the ochre holds the warm tone of dried earth, soft and muted. You watch the cloth grow slowly, each pass adding a narrow stripe to the fabric's length. Your fingers brush the finished edge, feeling the tight weave and the subtle roughness of the dyed fibers. The cloth is meant for more than mere garments. It will become a visible sign of the bride's household, a banner of their skill and care. You know how many months or even years such a piece might represent? Each thread a silent stitch in the story of a family's labor. Quirky traditions surround weaving here. Some say the colors chosen tell of family history or village identity. Others believe the length of the cloth carries a blessing for fertility and prosperity. The weaver today wears a narrow band of cloth tied around his wrist, dyed with the same indigo, a charm against misfortune. Historians still argue whether weaving was mainly a woman's task or if men regularly took part in producing dowry cloth in 15th century Ethiopia. Some suggest men wove larger household textiles, while women made finer garments. Others see the work as shared across genders. Here, the steady hands of a man at the loom challenge any simple answer. You note the cloth's dimensions and colors carefully in your ledger, leaving room to add more if the family chooses. As the shuttle moves once more, you step back, the quiet rhythm a soft accompaniment to the ongoing negotiations. The faint scent of frankincense rises from a small clay burner nearby, its smoke curling upward in slow, pale spirals. The resin's aroma is sharp yet soothing, filling the courtyard with a scent both ancient and familiar. You watch the smoke twist and fold, its movement almost hypnotic in the warm afternoon light. The clay burner is simple, round, and squat, with small holes punched around its sides to let the air flow. The embers inside glow faintly, feeding the slow, steady burn of the incense. This fragrance has long been a part of ceremonies and agreements here, believed to purify the air and invite the favor of the spirits. You breathe deeply, the sharpness of the frankincense mixing with the earthiness of the courtyard, the faint musk of animals, and the soft rustle of fabric. It is a scent that holds stories, layered like the many years these hills have witnessed. Quirky customs include the offering of frankincense to guests before talks begin, sometimes accompanied by a small blessing or prayer. Others scatter a few drops of resin dust on the ground to mark the space as sacred for the negotiation. Today, the smoke alone seems enough to lend the gathering its quiet solemnity. Historians still debate how widespread the ritual use of frankincense was in 15th century Ethiopian daily life versus special occasions. Some sources describe it as common in both public and private ceremonies. Others suggest its use was reserved for the highest-ranking families or church events. For you, its presence today feels both practical and symbolic, a fragrant thread tying past and present. You watch the smoke rise and dissipate, letting your mind settle with its steady flow, a gentle current beneath the weight of words and agreements. The talk turns to land, a topic as old and shifting as the hills themselves. You watch as hands trace invisible lines in the dust, marking boundaries not drawn on maps but remembered in stories and agreements passed down through generations. The gesture is slow, deliberate, fingers moving in careful arcs that speak of valleys, ridges, and the soft curves of cultivated terraces. The elders nod at the drawn lines, their faces thoughtful. They speak of fields tilled by father and grandfather, of streams that have fed crops for decades, of trees planted not for shade but as markers between families. The land is not just soil but a living ledger, each furrow a chapter in the story of this place. You lean forward slightly, feeling the cool dust sift through your fingers as you mimic the tracing. The dust is dry, powdery, slipping easily between skin and nail, a reminder that land, like negotiation, is never held tightly but always with respect and care. Quirky customs color these discussions. Some families carry small stones from their fields to place on boundary markers, believing the stones hold the spirit of the land. Others recite old songs or poems as they speak of their holdings, tying words and earth in a woven memory. Today, the conversation remains quiet. No song sung aloud but a sense of history humming beneath each word. Historians still debate whether formal boundaries in 15th century Ethiopian highlands were enforced by written documents or relied solely on oral tradition and local consensus. Some argue that the presence of scribes like yourself marks a shift toward written agreements. Others insist that oral testimony remained primary for much longer. You see, both in practice the ledger is important, but the spoken word carries equal weight. You make notes of the land, described rough boundaries, approximate sizes, key landmarks. Each detail matters in the balance of the dowry, where land promises livelihood and security as much as animals or silver. As the sun shifts higher, the shadows lengthen and shorten in a slow dance across the courtyard stones. The weight of land lies heavily in your mind, an unseen tether holding these families together in mutual claim and responsibility. You shift your gaze as the sun's light slides across the smooth stones of the courtyard floor. The shifting shadow moves like a slow tide, creeping steadily toward the parchment where your ledger lies open. The air is still, carrying only the faint rustle of robes and the soft murmur of voices weaving agreements. Time here feels both measured and expansive. The sun's path marks the day, but the weight of the negotiations seems to slow its passage. Each moment stretches, carrying the breath of history and the hope of futures still unwritten. You glance around the courtyard, the benches worn smooth by generations, the small plants growing in stone pots near the wall, the faint scent of earth and resin mixing in the air. The light shifts, casting long lines and soft pools of gold that frame the faces of those seated around you. A child's laughter rises from the gate, brief and bright like a sudden breeze. It seems to push back against the quiet weight of the day, reminding you that life flows beyond the ledger's pages and the spoken words. Historians still debate whether such pauses, marked by shifting light or small interruptions, held any ritual significance in 15th century Ethiopian negotiations. Some suggest that these natural moments offered unspoken cues to end talks or to signal a shift in mood. Others see them as mere happenstance, glimpses of daily life intruding upon solemn business. For you, these pauses offer a breath, a chance to steady mind and hand before continuing. You adjust your pen, ready to move forward with the next section of the agreement. The sun's light falls again on the ledger, steady and bright, as if lending its own silent witness to the day's careful counting. A warm dish of stewed lentils arrives, carried by a young woman with a quiet smile. The clay bowl she sets before you is simple but well-worn, its surface stained by years of use. The lentils are soft and fragrant, simmered slowly with a hint of berberry. a blend of spices that fills the air with gentle heat and earthiness. You scoop a small spoonful, feeling the warmth against your lips. The lentils taste rich, with subtle notes of garlic and mild chili that linger without overwhelming. Each bite is comforting, a reminder of the steady work that sustains these households through long seasons. The elders around you share in the meal with measured bites, their conversation light but respectful. The food breaks the tension of the morning's counting, offering a moment of shared humanity amid the careful measures and negotiations. Quirky traditions often accompany such meals. Some families begin the first bite with a silent blessing. Others share the bread before the stew, symbolizing unity and trust. Today, the eating is quiet and focused, a soft interlude in the day's unfolding story. Historians still debate how common such shared meals were during dowry negotiations in 15th century Ethiopia. Some accounts describe frequent breaks to eat and drink, reinforcing social bonds. Others suggest meals were reserved for final agreements or celebrations. Your experience tells you these moments matter, no matter when they occur. You finish the last spoonful slowly, savoring the warmth and the calm it brings. The day stretches ahead, measured not just by the ledger's ink, but by the rhythms of hunger, rest, and conversation woven through the hours. A pair of ivory combs are laid before you next, resting on a small piece of woven cloth embroidered with tiny red and gold stitches. Their pale surfaces gleam softly in the afternoon light, smooth to the touch, and carved with delicate, swirling patterns that speak of skilled hands and patient work. You lift one carefully, feeling its weight in your palm. The ivory is cool and dense, shaped to fit comfortably in a hand meant to groom fine hair. The teeth are evenly spaced, their points slightly rounded from use but still sharp enough to glide through the thick locks common here. These combs are more than practical tools. They are tokens of care and beauty, often cherished as family heirlooms. The elder who presents them explains that such combs were sometimes given as part of a dowry to symbolize a bride's grace and the hope for a well-kept household. Their rarity makes them prized gifts, often carried across generations and passed down to daughters-in-law as a sign of respect and continuity. Quirky customs surround the presentation of combs. Some families wrap them in strips of red cloth before including them in the dowry, believing the color wards off misfortune. Others place small charms in the folds to invite fertility and health. Today, the combs are unadorned, their elegance speaking for itself. Historians still debate the sources of ivory in 15th century Ethiopia, whether it was mostly imported from coastal regions or locally acquired from elephant herds roaming the southern forests. Trade routes brought many precious goods inland, and ivory's presence in dowries reflects both the wealth of families and the reach of their connections. You note the combs carefully in your ledger, their condition, size, and craftsmanship recorded with precision. As you close the book, the afternoon light catches the smooth curve of the ivory, casting faint shadows that seem to dance with the stories the combs have carried through time. As the afternoon deepens, an elder begins recounting stories of ancestors long gone. His voice is low and steady, weaving tales of old battles, wise leaders, and the hardships endured by those who came before. Names roll out like stones, set carefully in a path, each one carrying weight and meaning, linking the families gathered here to a shared history. You listen closely, the words drawing a tapestry that extends beyond the immediate concerns of the day. The stories remind all present of the lineage that shapes their identities and the bonds that these negotiations seek to honor and preserve. The elder's eyes shine with quiet pride, his hands resting on a carved walking stick that has seen many such gatherings. Quirky details punctuate these ancestral tales, some names whispered with reverence, others with a chuckle, recalling a particular folly or stubbornness. There are mentions of ancient weapons carried into battle, of lands gained and lost, and of oaths sworn beneath the same sky that now shelters this courtyard. Historians still debate the accuracy of oral histories passed down through generations. While some details align with written records, others vary, shaped by memory and meaning rather than strict fact. You appreciate the stories not just for their truth, but for their power to bind families together in times of change. As the elder finishes, a respectful silence falls. The weight of the past settles gently over the group, a reminder that today's agreements are but the latest chapter in a long, ongoing story. You feel the steady presence of history beneath your pen, grounding each entry in the ledger with the strength of those who came before. The moment arrives to add the final seal to the agreement. You take the small lump of wax, soft and warm, from being held in a palm and press it gently onto the corner of the last parchment page. The wax settles smoothly, its deep red color standing out against the creamy parchment like a final signature from the past. From your satchel, you retrieve the metal stamp, its surface worn from years of use but still sharp in design. The symbol engraved upon it is simple, a cross entwined with a circle, marking the bond as sacred and binding. Pressing the stamp firmly into the wax, you leave a clear impression, the edges crisp and clean. The elders lean in to inspect the seal, their eyes resting on it with a sense of completion. The wax cools quickly in the mountain air, hardening into a lasting mark that will hold the agreement together in the eyes of family and faith. Quirky customs sometimes call for the seal to be broken only after the first anniversary of the marriage, symbolizing the unbroken promise between households. Others add a drop of honey to the wax before stamping, infusing sweetness into the bond. Today's seal is plain, but no less meaningful, a silent witness to the careful work of the day. Historians still debate the origin of seal stamps in Ethiopian highland negotiations, whether they were introduced through trade with distant cultures or developed locally as a means of formalizing agreements. Some early seals show intricate designs influenced by foreign art, while others are distinctly native in style. Your own stamp carries the simplicity of generations, a tool passed from hand to hand with steady purpose. With the seal set, you close the ledger fully, tying the leather cord securely once more. The day's records are complete, held together not just by ink and wax, but by the trust and care woven through every word and gesture. You step away from the gathering and begin the walk back through the quiet streets. The afternoon sun has softened, casting long, warm shadows that stretch across the uneven cobblestones. The houses, built from sun-dried bricks and topped with woven thatch, lean slightly as if nodding to one another in the gentle breeze. The air is cooler now, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and drying herbs from nearby gardens. Children's voices echo faintly from an open window, and a dog barks somewhere down the lane. You feel the steady rhythm of the town around you, the familiar hum of daily life continuing even as your own day of negotiation comes to a close. You pass the small market square, where the stalls are beginning to fold away their cloths and baskets. A vendor carefully stacks the last of his woven baskets, while another sweeps dust and fallen leaves from his stall. The sounds and smells mingle, a warm loaf baking somewhere, the clink of pottery, the soft shuffle of bare feet on stone. Your footsteps fall lightly as you take in the scene, the memory of the day's work settling into a quiet satisfaction. The promises made and recorded will shape futures beyond this afternoon, yet the world here remains constant, a tapestry of small moments, of people moving through familiar spaces. Historians still debate how quickly news of such agreements traveled beyond the local community, whether word spread by travelers and traders, or remained closely held until formal celebrations. You suspect it was a mixture, the balance shifting with each family and each negotiation. As you reach your door, you pause briefly to look back down the lane. The sun dips lower, turning the stones to gold. You breathe deeply, letting the calm settle around you like a cloak, the day's weight lightened by the slow unfolding of evening. You pause once more to count the agreed goods, a final reckoning before parting. The ledger lies open on your lap, its pages worn but steady beneath your fingers. Each line, grain, goats, cloth, silver, salt, is a note in a quiet symphony of exchange, a balance carefully measured between promise and reality. The elders gather closer, their eyes scanning the list with the calm scrutiny of those who know the importance of accuracy. You read aloud the items and numbers once more, your voice steady and clear. No additions, no objections. The record stands as a shared truth, an anchor for the family's futures. The sun has begun its slow descent, casting a warm glow over the courtyard. The shadows stretch longer, pooling softly at the feet of those seated. The light catches the edges of the ink, making the written words seem to glow with their own quiet power. Quirky moments linger in these final tallies. Sometimes a child's laughter punctuates the air, a reminder of life beyond contract. Other times, a stray goat wanders near, its curious eyes watching the proceedings as if understanding the weight they carry. Historians still debate how often such final counts were challenged after the fact. Some say disputes were common, leading to repeated gatherings and renegotiations. Others insist that the formal record, once sealed, was accepted without question. You know from experience that both are true, depending on the families and circumstances involved. You close the ledger gently, the leather soft against your palm. The day's work is done here, the numbers set like stones along a path leading forward. Families come together now to exchange blessings, a ritual as old as the hills surrounding the village. Hands are extended, palms touching gently as elders speak words of goodwill. The bride's mother smiles softly, her eyes shining with tears held back by pride and hope. The groom's father nods solemnly, his grip firm and steady as he returns the gesture. The air hums with quiet prayers, voices weaving through the courtyard like threads of fine cloth. Blessings for fertility, for health, for long life and happiness flow between the gathered kin, tying the families together in bonds beyond contract or ledger. You watch as hands clasp and release, the gestures speaking of trust, respect, and shared futures. Children gather close, their laughter soft but persistent, adding a lightness to the solemnity. Nearby, a fire crackles softly, sending up thin tendrils of smoke that mingle with the scent of frankincense still lingering from earlier. Quirky customs infuse this moment with warmth. Some families carry small tokens, beads, woven strips, or carved wood to exchange as tangible signs of blessing. Others sing low hymns, their voices rising and falling in gentle waves. Today, the blessings are spoken quietly, their power held in the steady rhythm of voices united. Historians still debate how much these blessing exchanges influenced the legal standing of dowry agreements. Some believe they were purely symbolic, while others suggest they acted as binding acts, witnessed by the community and the divine. You feel they are both a bridge between earthly and spiritual worlds. As the blessings conclude, you feel the circle close, the agreement sealed not just by ink and seal but by shared hope and faith. As evening settles, you find a quiet corner beside the oil lamp flickering softly in the dim room. The glow casts gentle shadows on the walls, the light warm and steady against the coolness creeping in through the open window. The day's weight begins to lift, replaced by the calm that follows careful work. You settle onto a woven mat, the texture firm beneath you, but comforting after hours of standing and sitting in the courtyard. The lamp's flame dances lightly, its movement slow, almost hypnotic, as if echoing the gentle rhythms of the day just past. Outside, the sounds of the village soften, children's laughter fades, doors close with quiet thuds, and the distant bleat of a goat lingers like a fading note. The air carries the scent of smoke from cooking fires, mingled with the faint trace of dried herbs hung to dry along the rafters. Your thoughts drift over the day's negotiations, the careful counting and weighing of goods, the stories and blessings exchanged. Each moment folded into the next, like the pages of the ledger now resting closed beside you. You feel the quiet power in that record, not just ink and parchment, but the promise of lives intertwined and futures shared. Quirky details come to mind: the goat that sniffed your satchel, the children chasing chickens, the smoke from the frankincense curling in the lamplight. These are the small threads that weave the tapestry of the day, subtle and essential. Historians still argue whether such evenings were marked by further gatherings, or if this moment of rest was the true end of the day's work. You prefer to think of it as a gentle closing, a time to let the day's weight settle before tomorrow's dawn. You breathe deeply, letting the calm settle around you like a soft blanket. The oil lamp's flame steadies, the shadows soften, and your eyes grow heavy. The day's negotiations rest now in silent trust, carried gently into the night. The night deepens around you as you lie back on the woven mat, the faint glow of the oil lamp casting soft, flickering light against the rough walls. Outside, the village has quieted, the last sounds of footsteps and whispers fading into a gentle stillness. You feel the steady pulse of the mountain air through the open window, a cool breath carrying the scents of earth, smoke, and distant pine. Your body sinks deeper into the comfort of the familiar room, each breath slowing, becoming lighter. Thoughts of the day's careful negotiations drift through your mind like slow-moving clouds. The counting of goats, the inspection of fine cloth, the weight of silver and salt, the sweetness of honey, and the quiet prayers exchanged all fold gently into the fabric of this place, a tapestry woven with care and quiet purpose. The flickering flame beside you seems to mirror the rhythm of your breath, rising and falling softly. The smoke curls upward, dissolving into the darkening room, like whispered secrets carried away by the night. You imagine the families resting now, their hearts lighter for the promises made, the bonds strengthened, and the futures quietly planned. In this moment, the world feels at peace, a pause between the work of days and the dreams of night. As your eyes close, the memory of this day lingers like a gentle lullaby, carrying you slowly, softly into sleep. We hope this little journey through time has been a pleasant one for you. If you'd like to hear more, please like, share, or leave a kind comment. And make sure to subscribe, so you'll be here for the next unhurried story from Timeless and Boring. Sweet dreams